The purpose of life support is to help others know how to come alongside those who are hurting and suffering. And hosted by Paul Johnson, Senior Pastor of Ridgewood Church in Minnetonka, Minnesota.
Everything you do from then on is different.
One of the detectives, I think his name was
He was a
Derek.
cold. All we can do right now is come together.
Extreme domestic violence, multiple rapes.
It's interesting, the Bible's so clear about suffering and about the intent of God in suffering, which is God ordained, number one. Number two, there is this quest, I believe, by Jesus to draw us to himself in a new way that many times only happens in suffering. And I think back to when the disciples encountered the blind man and just asked Jesus, who was it that sinned? Was it his mother, father? Did he sin? And Jesus said, no, there was no sin here. He was blind because I'm going to show you my glory.
Right.
Which flies right in the face of that kind of theology. And if you could go back to that moment right now, and Tim, you probably weren't, you were in the same place that Jenita was in a lot of ways. You were hoping for support. What would you say to him if you could go back again and replay that whole scene in your mind as a pastor?
I think I would just cut it short, honestly. It's one of those things that if that is your belief that this is sin, it's going to be more than one conversation. And looking back, I would have said, I know that you, I believe at least that you mean well, that you're trying to help, but this actually isn't helpful, and I don't believe that it's truth that you're speaking, and so let's talk about it more later. But right now, I think we've had enough for today.
So that's proper boundary setting. So someone's
Absolutely.
listening right now and they're undergoing suffering. They've got people in their lives that are pressing them, maybe in different ways. They're pressing them with the Hallmark card phrases or the Bible verses or the get well
Right.
quickly kind of things. It's okay to boundary set,
Yes.
right? It's okay to say, not right now,
Yes, you must in order to keep yourself safe and healthy,
right?
for sure.
All right, so you have all of this going on, and right now, if we left your story the way it was, it would seem very dark and dire
Yes.
and hopeless.
Yes.
How did you crawl out of this place? What happened?
Well, it's, Pat began mentoring me, and she, like I said, she would come over every day if I didn't get out of bed, and then she would just continue to love on me. And then one day, it was not too long after we began this mentorship that I got a phone call from Tim saying that Pat had an aneurysm and died suddenly. And I was just broken. I mean, here was my person.
And how long was this into your relationship with her that she passed away?
I think about a month and a half.
That's all.
It was
She had that kind of impact
Oh,
in
yeah.
your life in that short a time. Wow.
never will we forget Pat. Never.
Pat is a person that we could all have. And that's what we hope for in Christian community. And that's why when we don't have a Pat and people tend to disappoint us, it's easy to go to the dark side and get cynical and angry. And
Yeah, I thought,
and
oh my
lonely.
gosh, what am I going to do now? So our mailbox was down the road, so I thought, okay, I'm going to go for a walk. So I put my shoes on, I got the dog, I walked down to the mailbox, and I opened my mailbox, and there was a card from Pat. She'd mailed it the day she died. And in it, she wrote, Jenita, and she was so feisty. Jenita Pace, she wrote my full name. Jenita Pace, I don't want you to forget this, so I'm going to write it down. God is going to use this, and you're going to see. And oh my gosh, it was like a card from the other side.
wow. Wow. And that's obviously part of God just reaching into your life and saying, I'm still here.
Right, right. So we decided to move to Minnesota where my family was in order
Well, that
to
was
get
kind of
support.
the catalyst, right? I mean, because our one support person that we really were clinging to Pat, who was clinging to Jesus for us, really was the way that worked. And when she was gone, we just it was we thought we have to have more help. We know that it is possible to have help from other people.
Right.
That is tremendously beneficial. And we started to visit some Christian counselors, and one of those counselors, I don't even remember her name, suggested that we move back to where Jenita's family lived, because they will recognize. They'll just treat her the way she always has been. And help her remember that. And it was one of those things that for me, like, I just felt like the Holy Spirit really spoke in the moment and was like, "That's it. That's the advice. That's what I want you to do." And it was less than a month later, we had moved to Minnesota.
Yeah.
You know that most people move the other direction when they're struggling with depression, not to Minnesota. And I hope it wasn't in the middle of the winter.
It was February,
It
actually.
was February.
Yeah. So that's God involved.
Right. You gotta be kidding me. Yeah.
And so how did that go, moving back here with family?
It was falling into the arms of people who, so my family, no one in our immediate family had depression. So yes, you might have a loved one who's struggling. That doesn't mean you can't minister to them. My family went on a mission to interview counselors and to get information on what would help. And then what was so refreshing is that they knew me. For those that are depressed, when you're in a depression, that's not you. That's not who you are. It's an experience you're having. And so to be around people that knew me, like they knew Jenita Pace, and they knew what they were seeing right now wasn't me, but also that they were comfortable sitting with the Jenita Pace that was depressed. You need people who are not scared. They're patient and they're not intimidated to be with you when you're broken. And that's what I found.
Well, they're scared probably, but they're not scared away.
Yes, not scared away.
And
Yeah, that's a very good way to phrase it. Scared but not scared away.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so great for me in that to know that no matter what time it is, I have somebody I can call. Their family, they are not going anywhere. They're gonna and they reminded us of those same things, that we're here. This may be a really long haul, but we're here. We're not going anywhere, and that was really restful to know that I could rely on somebody.
Yeah, and I think that was important too for Tim as the caregiver. I feel like for those caregivers listening, you can't do this alone. You think of when you go to lift a really heavy object, the more people that you have helping, the quicker and the more support you have, the easier it is. And so finding that we didn't need just a pat, we needed a network. People that could tag team and take a turn. I think that was vital for Tim's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tim and Jenita Pace, we're talking to right now on life support, hearing their amazing story of depression turned to hope. And we're so glad to have you. By the way, if you are listening right now and this is conjuring up thoughts in your own mind, or you've been struggling with thoughts of suicide, there is a great place to turn. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255. If you're struggling at all, please call confidential, and it's not shameful to reach out and get help. Do not let it go any further,
Right.
for sure. So here you are with family who are not trying to fix you now. They're just with you, which is so hard to do when someone is struggling.
Yes.
You want to fix them, especially we as guys, right? We want to reach over and we want to make everything better. But the thing that for caregivers and friends is you can't.
No, you can't.
You can't fix the problem. What you can do, though, is you can provide stability and hope. And that's what you were getting from your family.
Yes. And my mother actually helped locate an outpatient group. That was wonderful. And as I began outpatient, I told my therapist one day, I think I want to be a counselor. And he said, "Oh, that's ambitious of you."
Right.
I don't know if that's your line of work.
I think he said it was manic. Yeah, he was like, "Oh, you're going through a manic phase,"
But he he just didn't feel maybe that was my calling. But I really started thinking about the people that God uses in the Bible, and they are just the unlikely characters. You have Esther, who's an orphan, and you have David, who is the youngest, not set up to be a king, and even you have Jesus, who is a carpenter. I think these characters model the fact that they come from the most unlikely places, and they carry with them life experience that empowers them. And so it just actually more solidified in me that, gosh, maybe this is what Pat was seeing that I was just catching on to.
And so you didn't listen to the advice of that therapist. You barged ahead.
Yes.
And you went for it.
I did. And I applied the counseling program I applied to. I was very honest. I explained my history and where I was now. And I thought, well, if I'm not meant to do this, then they'll close the door. And they didn't. They didn't have many spots open. So it was very competitive, and I was very grateful to get in.
So now you've gone from being this very broken person, not knowing where to turn, and now people are coming to you for help.
Yes.
And when someone's sitting across from you that you're relating to their story, similar story maybe, or maybe trauma in a different way.
Right.
How do you as a therapist help them? Because they actually are coming to you to help get fixed. So how do you put these different tools that you've learned into play in that kind of a setting?
Well, obviously there's all the therapeutic training, but on top of that, and in addition to that, is that Pat modeled tenacity to let the person know that you're not going anywhere. They don't have to worry about breaking you in their brokenness. And that unconditional listening, unconditional acceptance. And then the Bible, used correctly, is very soothing. We talk about the Bible being a sword, and swords can hurt people. Yeah. So the Bible misused can do a lot of damage, but the Bible used correctly can be the most soothing place to find rest. And so using different parts of the Bible that remind people that in their suffering, as they travel through a depression, it will actually become a more powerful tool for the Lord. And so if you're listening and you're depressed, I'm a therapist now, so I think God can God can use anyone, as they go.
Well, and not just anyone. He especially took you and all of this fabric that your life is and woven together so that you could be exactly who you are right now. And without those experiences, you wouldn't have that to offer.
Yeah.
And that's quite an amazing thing about God.
Yeah.
Is through all the darkness, he's weaving something together.
Right.
That he's going to use and is using. That we don't really, Pat doesn't have any idea.
Right.
She will someday.
Oh,
she probably knows now.
She's probably going to say, I told you so over and over.
Yeah, she's probably listening to this right now, shaking her head, which I'm not sure is good theology. But, but people like Pat are part of that process in bringing you to where you are right now, which is quite amazing, really, when you think about it. When people are listening to this and thinking through their own lives, and they're thinking about people right now, I'm sure that are going through this, their own friends, or maybe they've been struggling with depression. The number one thing that comes to mind really is there's something wrong spiritually, immediately. Yeah. And sometimes there is. There's no doubt. There's a spiritual equation, there's spiritual warfare that's going on. I think as a pastor's wife, you were prime target for spiritual warfare, but not always. And so how would you refute that first lie that comes to mind, that there's something wrong with me? I'm not good enough. I can't tell anyone. How would you tell them immediately, no, don't go there? What would you say?
This is going to sound like a weird analogy, but I was watching National Geographic one night, and it was showing the predators, how the show was talking about how the predators, if they can get one of the prey alone and sidetracked, and they can pick off one that looks weak, then that's what they go for. And so I would want to tell the person that keep in the pack. Like we want you because we want to help protect you. We want to come around you and keep you safe. And I would tell them, and this is something that Tim and Pat would tell me, is that this isn't you. This is something you're experiencing. And so trust us as safe people, that we will love you, and we will carry that hope for you. Because I think part of it was I felt guilty that I didn't trust God. And so to have Pat and Tim say, we will trust God for you. Like, just let us love you and take care of you. That took some pressure off me, because I think I felt like if I didn't get things spiritually organized in an equation that made sense to me, then I was a bad person. And if you're depressed, the equation may not look right for a while. And so fall into Jesus' arms, because he can take it. Yeah. And the other piece is it changed my view of God. I used to think of God as up higher than me, and I was praying to a God that was very removed. But it was a revelation when I realized that the Holy Spirit resides in us. So he experiences the pain with us. So we're not praying to a God who is watching without an experience. Yeah. And so God is not afraid to stand with you, but he's also experiencing the pain with you.
I often think of Jesus as he was being crucified. We have this, famous views of him being up on this big mountain, far removed from the passing crowd, but more likely near the path, where people could spit on him and touch him. And he went through all the different kinds of abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, right? All of it. The Father grieved for his Son. There's all of these emotions that the Bible tells us now that Jesus is our high priest, and he has these things in common. He can understand these things. And Tim, as pastors, we have all of these people in our congregations that are in trauma. And I think he really landed on the number one issue, at least for me, when Taylor was killed, was just outright vulnerability. So raw. Yeah. How would you counsel other pastors to move into the life of someone in their congregation who was in trauma and came to them for help?
First and foremost, the assurance that you're not going to stop loving them is just vital. That's something that I listen for when I'm going through almost anything, and I know the value of community. I know the value of going arm in arm with other people through something. That I listen for people who are, I'm not going anywhere. I love you no matter what. Like, this is going to be a together thing and not an alone thing.
So you just tell them that straight out.
Right.
But don't say it if you don't mean it.
Don't say it if you don't mean it at all. And then I look for ways that they mean it. And I think that we can show as pastors, but even beyond that, just as friends, as fellow believers, there are ways that we can let people know how much we care, beyond just saying I really care for you or I'm going to pray for you. But we can pray for people in the moment, even in a text message. I know, like, it's so easy to say, okay, thank you for telling me that. I'm praying for you, brother. I'm praying for you, sister. But to say, you know what, I hear you. I'm so glad that you reached out, that you trusted me with this information. Like, I'm praying this for you right now, and typing even the words of that prayer, because I think even to Pat's letter that we got from her after she had passed away, that the words that she was praying, even in the letter, were words that we went back to, and then the hope that is that we know as pastors, the ultimate hope is in Christ, and the passage that I go back to over and over again from the time that this started till now is 2 Corinthians 1, and I read through that, and Paul's recounting this, how they had gone through horrible trials, and they felt like even that they were at the brink of death, and yet God comforted them, because he is the God of all comfort. And he didn't just comfort them so that it would be for them alone, but so that they could comfort others in the future with the comfort that they had already received from God. And it's this constant pointing back to the real hope, which is Christ. And I think to be able to see that there is purpose for what you're going through, and you may not see it, but that reassurance that there is purpose. God is going to use you, and God uses broken people like me, broken people like you all the time, and He's lifted up for that.
Well, that's well said, and a great way to wrap up our time together. Tim and Jenita, thank you so much for sharing that story. I know that it will bear fruit, and God bless your ministry in both of your lives as you move forward and carry the story with you.
Oh, thank you
Thanks
for
so
having
much
us.
for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to Tim and Jenita Pace for sharing their story on life support. The audio podcast is found on the homepage of myfaithradio.com. This program is a co-production of Five Stone Media and Ridgewood Church in Minnetonka, Minnesota.